Hello, hello, and welcome to Media 2070's fourth anniversary live stream. I'm your host for today, Tiana Magnon, and I'm so excited to be in community with you all for such an important conversation. So please, I can't stress enough, this is an engaging conversation. We want to talk back and forth with you. So check in the comments, drop your name, where you're joining from if you're already here, and how you're connected to Media 2070. I think it's really good for us all to know each other. So we'll just take a few seconds and we'll give you a, you know, time to kind of just drop in where you're coming from. Oh, hey, Todd. Excited for this presentation. Yes, I think we all are. There's going to be some great folks speaking today. Toya from Rochester, New York. That's my mama, y'all. So yes, please, as we get going here, please just drop your name in, tell folks how you know us, and then that way we can kind of get to know each other too in this space. A little bit about what we're going to discuss today. I want to make sure that you all understand a little bit about our agenda here. So we're going to first speak with Anshantia Oso, our new senior director. She's going to explain everything from what we mean by media reparations to some of the work around our framework. We will also have Joe Torres here, like our resident celebrity on the team. I like to poke fun at him. He's been doing a lot of incredible work around the FCC and just the history of broadcast media. We'll also hear from Vanikia Williams, Diamond Hardiman. They'll discuss our partnerships with USC, Colorado College, and then we'll also hear about membership. So I can't stress enough as we're going through this, this is not a rote presentation. Please engage with us. It makes it so much more fun. So we do have a formal Q&A at the end, but we will try and slot them in as we go. So I won't take up too much time. Let's bring on Media 2070's new senior director, Anshantia Oso.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much, Tiana, for being our MC, our publicist, our media maven. Super excited and really honored and humbled to be joining this team and sharing with you all this our fourth anniversary celebration by talking about what is media reparations, how we got here, and then moving us through, talking about some of our. So, what is media reparations? That began with our launch 4 years ago this month in October of 2020. Members at Free not only reckon with that moment of reckoning that so many people were wrestling with, but also wanting to create answers, right, and move. And so not only is Media 2070 a Black liberation project in the history, right, of the Black liberation movement, but we're also an Afrofuturist project. And so that is where the name 2070 came from. We are time travelers. We've been to the future. We won reparations. We won media reparations, absolutely, in the year 2070. And so we've come back to continue this work with all of you. And our first landmark project is the groundbreaking essay, An Invitation to Dream Up Media Reparations, which details the history of the United States media participation in anti-Black racism and harm and perpetuating racial hierarchies. This work helped to make visible the ways in which the media has taken part in and supported state violence and harm against Black people, and helped to catalyze the work that we do with journalists and media makers, reparations advocates, artists, creatives, and allies, where we engage, we educate, and we organize to make media reparations real. I encourage everyone to read our essay. We're going to drop it in the chat. And I want us to share and enroll you all in the mission to win media reparations, where we can realize true Black narrative power, which we believe will be the result, right, of a media system that loves Black people. And we believe that the reparations that we're fighting for will make it so that Black people have the capital, the power, and the resources to own the means of production, creation, and distribution of Black narratives, be they media, be they fiction, be they news, be they broadcast. As broad as our imaginations can think, that is what we mean when we say Black media power. We also consider ourselves introducing this body of work within the reparations movement, as well as a movement partner to support the work of reparations advocates with research, as well as strategy development and narrative strategy, because it's not just about the ways that media talks about reparations, but actually the role of the media system and the complicity of the media system in the ways that that system needs to bring redress and compensation and healing as well. I want us all to take note as you hear from the rest of the team on today and our partners and our visionary groundbreaking strategists that we're pushing this work forward in a transformative role, not just highlighting a harm, but working actively to change them. And we want to invite you as well. And we're inviting you through this live stream today and our outreach activities, inviting you to join this work with us. On that note, I'm going to bring up my colleague, Joe Torres, Senior Advisor of Reparative Policy and Programs, to talk more about our groundbreaking research, the essay, and so much more. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Tia.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
You're looking studious and scholarly in the library, of course.
Yeah, trying to. I haven't read all those books. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I buy books. I love buying books, and with the plan to one day read all these books, and some of them I haven't gotten to yet. So.
I do the same. I'm also a book collector. So you have a friend and an ally in me in more ways than one. And so for those of you who don't know, okay, Joe Torres is not just a researcher, but also an author. If you have not read his book with Juan Gonzalez, News for All the People, it is required reading in addition to the essay. And I wanted to ask you, Joe, what did you find what the role of the media system and journalism has been in perpetuating anti-Black harm and protecting racial hierarchies?
In regard to the essay, the essay, yes. When we published the essay in 2020, everyday folks, when you think about journalism, they tend not to think about journalism and in the institution's role in upholding white supremacy, upholding racial hierarchies, upholding racial capitalism. There's this kind of neutrality that's always talked about journalism and journalists, and for some reason, even our movements don't think about journalists and journalism and their role in the harm they have caused. It is hard to win any kind of social political gain, the struggle for racial justice without changing the narrative. The narrative is a political tool, and these newspapers and these media institutions, and as we write in the essay, their role is to they play a lot of different roles, but one of the key roles is deploying these anti-Black narratives in order to uphold racial hierarchy. So when you have the first colonial newspapers that talk about Black people are addicted to stealing a line, which is the first paper, continuous paper the United States did, or when the numerous newspapers are involved in slave trade, in publishing ads of enslavement of enslaved folks, where the publisher is often the person who is the broker between the buyer and the seller of enslaved people. That's the role. That's the role that the U.S. media has played. It played in lynching, in supporting lynching, and for Jim Crow and all these folks. All these folks who were all these folks who were developing these narratives and these practices that are still with us today. The idea that media as a Jim Crow still has not resolved and redressed this history of harm from enslavement through Jim Crow to the current day that we have. And that's what we try to outline in the essay on all the different iterations of our media system. But anti-Blackness is still very much central to the role of journalism in our country.
Absolutely. And you want to talk a little bit about how the essay has been received and the ways that allies and partners and folks in the public have been using it?
Yeah, we were thrilled when the project was launched, and we launched it, and we were received so well within so many in the community, in the journalism community as well. Columbia Journalism Review actually, forgetting the exact thing, but it says noted us as being one of the best examples of reporting, I think, on race in 2020. You know,
Wow.
I think that I'm forgetting now, but it was they cited us, you know, in the year end kind of thing. But it's also like it's being used in schools in different places to actually, you know, teach folks about this history. And while it's exciting that they're doing this, is also a little frustrating because there needs to be more content and material about this history that should exist. We shouldn't be learning about these things now, and we're still uncovering new things all the time about this history. And that's one of the, you know, obviously we're trying to continue to see the narrative of like see the understanding of like the role of media in upholding racial hierarchy. We continue to find more examples to demonstrate this in order to set up what does redress look like, because there needs to be redress.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you started talking about it a little bit. I wanted to ask you more in continuing that research and excavation. You've been uncovering some really interesting things about the FCC and developing our next body of research, right, that we want to share with the public. You want to share more about that, about the Federal Communications Commission and their role in racial discrimination and upholding racial hierarchies?
We're working on this essay, and the thing is like how can we start making ground on redressing the history of anti-Black racism and racism in FCC policymaking. You know, when you turn on the television today and you watch local news, you know, stories about crime and the criminalization of Black folks and other folks of color, it's a profit-making center for local television news.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we don't own we own very few of the broadcast stations. And these stations are supposed to serve in the public interest, a public good, but they're not serving a public good, right? When it comes to the harm they do to our communities and how we are portrayed as you know, this idea of what I just mentioned about newspapers criminalizing Black folks and other folks of color from like the 18th and 1700s. That narrative still is the narrative. And because it's still the narrative today. That narrative is still the criminalization of our communities. And so the FCC awards, the Federal Communications Commission, founded in 1934, supposed to serve in the public interest. But yet, you know, the first chairman of the FCC was the former Chief Justice of Mississippi Supreme Court, right? Or a former governor of a city in North Carolina that's you know, was a segregated city in the 1920s, became one of the first FCC commissioners. Another commissioner who was a newspaper publisher, a major newspaper publisher in Alabama, that supported the rise of the Klan in the mid 1900s, in 1915, 1916. His paper editorialized about the rise of the Klan. And so these are the folks who were some of the early commissioners of the FCC.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more history to like who were the people, what was happening at the time when the FCC was created. And the idea, I'll just stop here, is that there was no equal protection under the law, even though the FCC is supposed to serve in the public interest, following the Civil War and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and then leading up to Plessy versus Ferguson. So when equal protection and these laws are no longer on the books for Black folks from the 1890s through the 1950s and 60s, again, it's a reality with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act being passed. The FCC never redressed that. It gave out all these broadcast stations to segregationists that were using their airways, the public airways, our airways, to undermine the equal protection rights of Black folks and other folks of color, right? Of Black folks in the South, right? In other places, and it impacted programming nationwide too, because a lot of TV networks and stuff didn't want to offend the South in their programming. So, and I'll stop here. That when early radio was created, the early days of radio, and the idea, can it be a viable commercial product, right? Can companies like NBC, can he turn a profit from commercial radio? Obviously, the thing that made it commercially viable was minstrel shows, Amos and Andy's and others. Like, anti-Blackness was embedded. It was a profit center in the programming that made commercial radio viable, then of course broadcasting viable. So that's the stuff we have to redress, and it is not redressed, and it continues today. So the harm that's being done. So
Yeah, really amazing, compelling research, framing, and inquiry that you're doing. And I'm really always, enlightened and educated. And I also, this continues to spread. Like you said, these are not things that we should be learning brand new, but I see that as our role, right, as organizers, to educate people and to do knowledge production. And super just grateful and excited to be able to work alongside you as we educate about these things and then also build power, right, in order to demand redress. Because as you've just stated, from the very roots, right, and establishment of our media system and even our federal policy creators and regulators, right, were the same people who were writing segregation, the same people who were enforcing Jim Crow. And we have yet to reckon with any of that. And of course, right, because the knowledge has been hidden or the history has been obscured. So
one last thing, if I may, it's almost the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Black Press. During these early days of commercial radio, Black folks, before it was even commercial, were forming radio clubs across the country. So it's not like our communities haven't wanted to be like access to this stuff and use this stuff for the good of the community. But commissions like the FCC has basically excluded folks from participating in ownership of their own stories and narratives. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's also like communities that have been trying to tell their own stories for a long time.
Absolutely. With the opening line, we wish to plead our own cause. We always have resisted, and it is absolutely very important that we also bring that up and lift that up, that even with the repression and the exclusion, we have always forged a path, right, to tell our stories and to share our narratives. And we stand in that tradition as well. So much, Joe. I'm going to turn it back over to our MC, Tiana, for our next segment.
I am always so blown away by your work, Joe. Just kind of learning that history. I think so many people know that there are issues with the media, but they don't know the extent to the true kind of how many laws were created around this, how officially, sanctioned this was. So this is such important work. And thank you, Tia, for taking us through the media reparations history. You will hear more from Tia in a little bit, so that will be great. I do want to kind of take us through a few more segments here. We have so many amazing projects that there's quite a full slate. So I want to make sure that I'm moving us ahead. But please, I know we're talking about some complex stuff here. So if there's anything that you want to know, someone else may have the same question, please drop it in the comments. We don't want to just kind of, be speaking at you guys. This is much more of a lively discussion. So next, I am going to bring on Vanikia Williams. She is our campaign manager. And Vanikia, you're going to tell us a little bit about consortium, membership. Please tell us more.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Vanikia Williams. I'm the campaign manager for Media 2070. And when Media 2070 launched in 2020, it was with a group of folks who were doing the work in various ways, but within this ecosystem fighting for media advocacy and justice. And so we're here tonight celebrating 4 years of incredible work, some of which we'll talk about, like Black in the Newsroom, Black Future Newsstand, reparative journalism, things of that sort. But none of that work could be done without you all, done in partnership with folks like you. So this past year, we officialized, made official our membership, and it was a call to action. It was a watering hole conversation. Come and join us at the Oasis if you're in a newsroom that is harmful to you, if you're in any other space where you're not with like-minded and purpose-driven folks. We want to be that home for you. So I want to first start by answering the question of who can join. looking for and already consist of educators and organizers who are looking to go beyond media reform. There are abolitionists within our midst who are transforming the media system, right? We also have researchers and advocates for anti-racist future media, folks who are thinking beyond what currently is into what can be. So that futurist component is really important. We are composed of movement journalists and artists, healers, and policymakers, like Joe spoke of, different policy people who are doing elements of this work, and news leaders and folks who are looking for the development of new economic models. Again, some of our current systems don't work. So how are we building the future that we want to actually live in and participate in? And that work is being done by so many of you. So this is a call to action, a come and join us. And so that's a bit about who can join. I will then say how to join. Very easy. You do so by scheduling a meeting with someone like myself or my colleague Diamond Hardiman. We just have a few questions to get to know one another, discuss you and your organization's commitment to Black liberation as a project and the concept of collective power. And then discuss possible partnership opportunities where we can help amplify one another's work, things of that nature. In terms of benefits and requirements, that can be a conversation had within our meeting that's scheduled, but you'll get access to events like this and trainings that we do, capacity building information. And all that we ask in return is that you are a thought partner, share and exchange knowledge with us, show up for us when we're doing things like that as we show up for you as well. So again, this is all about Black liberation and building collective power. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other projects that we've done, but truly can't be overstated that without our partners, Black in the Newsroom wouldn't exist. Without our partners, Black Future Newsstand wouldn't exist, and so many others. So if you'd like to be officially a part of Media 2070's membership, please don't hesitate to speak to me. Thank you, Tiana.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough, the membership is perfect for aligning with like-minded people in this industry. It's so inspiring to see folks who are not only already there recognizing that this is an issue, but ready to do the work. I think we all know that famous adage, we go further together. So I just want to piggyback on what Vanikia is saying. Please, if you are already connected with this work, if this is something that you already care about, the membership is such an excellent way to take your advocacy to the next level. So please find Vanikia, head to our website. You can let us know in a comment and we will make sure that we can get everything set up. So yes, that's the membership. I also want to kind of segue us into our next section here. Like I said, we have quite a full slate. So we're going to talk about Black in the Newsroom, and we're going to show a trailer, tell you a little bit more about this film. And then we have an exciting speaker coming on, and it's going to be Colette Watson, who is actually the film's director. So we're really excited about that, and let's show the trailer.
I'm Elizabeth Montgomery, and I'm a journalist. I was kicked out of my house at 18, and journalism was the one thing that I knew I could do. They say they care about diversity.
When newsrooms are white dominated, there's not the diversity that reflects the community. It means that stories aren't told truthfully.
You're calling on me to write these stories. I'm making you look real good out here in the street. I didn't feel valued at all. I couldn't pay my rent. I couldn't buy groceries at the same time. It was either rent or groceries. It was just terrible. I don't even have the words still.
Such a moving clip. Thank you, Colette, for joining us. I know the room is excited to hear from you. So please tell us a little bit more about you and then tell us what went into creating such a moving film.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much, Tiana. It's wonderful to be with you and the team. As you mentioned, I'll introduce myself, Colette Watson. I am one of the co-creators of the Media 2070 project, along with all the lovely faces you see here today. And I'm currently working as director of Black River Life Collective. And in terms of what went into creating Black in the Newsroom, when we launched Media 2070 in the year 2020, we launched with an essay, as Joe and Tia mentioned earlier. And, you could say then that from the very beginning, we've centered the importance of cultural arts and narrative in the ways that we organize for media reparations. So moving into the realm of film really made a lot of sense for us. And around the same time, maybe about a year after our essay came out, there were many journalists across the country who were going public with their stories of harm. You have to remember this is around the time of George Floyd's murder and the global uprising for Black lives. So we were examining a lot of institutions in that time frame, newsrooms being among them. And one of the individuals who was speaking their truth was Elizabeth Montgomery, a mid-career journalist at the Arizona Republic, which is the major newspaper in the state of Arizona. So we, a couple of folks on our team were familiar with Elizabeth and her amazing journalism, and we were really dismayed to hear the ways that she had been targeted and the difficulty she was enduring in the industry. But we also knew that Elizabeth's story was certainly not the only one, and that there were so many and continue to be so many folks dealing with this across the industry, across news and journalism. So around the same time that Elizabeth and others were speaking their truth, a study was released by the News Guild, which is the union for newsroom workers. And what the News Guild did was study 6 different unionized newsrooms and their demographics and pay equity. And what they found was that across those newsrooms, there were notable pay gaps for women and for journalists of color, right? 2 identities, both of which are held by Elizabeth. The Arizona Republic, they found, was the most diverse newsroom, but had the largest gender and racial pay gaps. They found that women were making nearly $30,000 less than men on average at the Arizona Republic, and that journalists of color were making about $25,000 less on average in comparison to white employees. And so, this is important because for a number of reasons, right? But we found it really interesting because Gannett is the owner of the Arizona Republic. Gannett was one of the companies that was studied by the News Guild. Gannett is the largest daily newspaper company in the country. They own over 200 daily publications, including USA Today. And just yesterday, Gannett has announced that their publications, again, more than 200 across the country, will not publish presidential endorsements. So, whether it's through the lens of this electoral season or issues of pay equity, it's pretty clear and understandable that it's problematic to have a media system and a media company of this scale concentrated in just a few hands and dominated by just one worldview. These are not conditions for multiracial democracy, and certainly are conditions of harm for Black folks and other marginalized communities. So, for us, it was really important to not just share all of this data and information and evidence in our organizing for media reparations, but to share it through the lens of a personal story. Someone you could see and feel, and understand and put yourself in her shoes as a Black journalist.
Can you talk a little bit about the reception of the film? I know that you and a lot of the Media 2070 team, Diamond Hardiman, I mean, y'all were traveling and going to screenings. Diamond, do you actually want to join us and talk about this part?
Hi, everybody. I'm Diamond Hardiman. My pronouns are she, hers. And we definitely did a world tour with the film. And it was really exciting to be at all these different film festivals. We went to Detroit, the Black Film Festival in Detroit. We went to the Peachtree Village International Film. And Black in the Newsroom is actually an award-winning film, and Colette is an award-winning director. And and that's really important to note because these are films that are exploring all facets of life. They're exploring facets of love and Black community and Black relationship, so that we were able to be in these spaces and people were able to draw the connections between journalism and media and Black ownership, and how our narratives and stories were told was really important and really special. And you could also see people beginning to churn and think about, well, how does this affect me as a filmmaker? And how does this affect me as a storyteller in general? So we were able to make a lot of different connections throughout those journeys. Colette will also talk a little bit about our interactions with colleges, but in some of these settings, we also were able to connect journalists and community members, which is an important bridge for repair, so that we can understand how are we working together to tell these stories that feel more whole and feel more real about ourselves and our communities. So Colette, you want to talk a little bit about colleges and what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. It was an honor to be out on the road with you, with the team, screening Black in the Newsroom. And I was particularly affected when we screened it at universities. We were able to screen at San Diego State, Penn State, Arizona State, a couple other places. And for me, in those rooms, what I noticed was students kind of having this moment to say, whoa, you know, for them to hear these firsthand testimonies from Black journalists speaking to what they've experienced in the industry, right? Because there's not that many spaces for Black journalists and media makers to voice their truth. So students were able to hear that in space and get a deeper sense of what the industry is currently like. But what's cool about students is, you know, they still view the world with so much optimism. I sound like I'm cynical. I'm not. But they obviously, are in a place where they're learning and building towards the kind of world they want to live in. And I could real time see students connecting the dots that it doesn't have to be this way, that we can be part of organizing toward a future media and news and journalism and technology system that is abundant with love and care for Black communities. So, seeing those light bulb moments and seeing our intergenerational community be able to come together around these issues was really, really gratifying. And then, we were able to oftentimes share back people's responses with Elizabeth. People were expressing real support for her on a human level. And for me, that's gratifying because it means A, we're pouring into Elizabeth, who deserves everything. And B, we're seeding the concept that it's important for our communities to pour into and support community-minded Black journalists.
Now, one last question. I'm glad you brought that up. Did you see people, maybe they didn't even know this was an issue before watching this film? I mean, how many people kind of learned about this for the first time, do you think?
I think that it connected dots for folks, right? Because we have to live our lives through the lens of constantly protecting ourselves and being aware of the systems that have been created to harm us. So I think a lot of people at the beginning of the film, we had a montage of people saying, answering the question, do you trust local news? And overwhelmingly, the answer from Black folks was no. And so I think in that way, people have always understood these issues. But what it did do was give people a window into how the local media system and the way that it's currently set up, the way that it's currently consolidated into white, wealthy hands and dominated by a worldview of racial hierarchy, how that creates harm. for Black journalists, for Black communities, how that creates conditions for injustice, and how it creates an environment where politicians and others can use the media as a tool to enact policies and politics of harm against Black folks. I think it did help people to just go even further in understanding that. But people were already, particularly in the sort of like independent creator community, Diamond can tell you, people are already thinking like we can have something better than what we got. And so what this film just kind of did was bridge people into the how of that. Would you say so, Diamond?
Yeah, most definitely. I was not in my head a lot because a lot of people understand that media is harmful to them. Like they may not be able to point out that it upholds racial hierarchy, but we know that we don't like it and we know that it doesn't feel good. And so I really appreciate the way that the film is able to stretch that open and give people an opportunity to look inside the machine and understand how that's happening. And I think it's also really important that it gives us a look inside of the newsroom, because it kind of explains why the product you're experiencing is so harmful, because its creation process is also harmful for Black journalists and journalists of color. And something that I really noticed at a lot of the places that it was screened, especially where journalists were present, is it gave them the space to talk about the harm that they've experienced in the newsroom, because there is a real culture of silence when it comes to newsrooms and the way that they treat employees of color, especially Black women, especially Black journalists. And as we see all these newsrooms firing folks of color, having these purges of people, internal memos getting exposed, like this is a really important moment and opportunity for people to bring some of that to the light. So I think that the film was really important to that as well.
No, that's perfect. I think the film does such a good job, like you were saying, of kind of shining a light on the process before we even get to that product. We have work to do back here. And Colette, you mentioned something about just kind of envisioning something better. Doesn't have to be this. So I want to bring you guys back on stage after we watch a quick clip. We're going to actually segue into the Black Future Newsstand, because I think that really builds on what Colette is saying here, where we want something different. Now let's start to dream about it. Let's create this. So let's watch a quick clip from the Black Future Newsstand, and then I'll bring you both back on to talk a little bit more about it. Wow, I might be biased, but just beautiful. So let's talk a little bit, and I don't want to speak over either of you. Tell the room a little bit about the inception for Black Future Newsstand, and I mean, where this even came from.
I guess I can start us off, Diamond. As I mentioned earlier, we incorporate a lot of art into the ways that we deal with organizing and being an organizing hub. And I think it's because we understand that when you say you're inviting folks to dream up media reparations, you are in a lineage of Afrofuturism where we are dreaming up a world that has not existed before. And when we talk about reparations, we often say at Media 2070 and the Media 2070 family that reparations are inevitable. So with that knowledge, we got to know what we want on the other side. You know what I mean? So when Black Future Newsstand came about from different conversations with our sibling Alicia Bell, as well as Carla Murphy, and other folks, us here on this stream today, where we were just talking about what would it be like if we could immerse people in a felt experience, a manifestation of this future media and technology system that we're organizing toward, the one that can get us to a future that's abundant with repair, as well as the media and technology system that we want on the other side once we have won reparations, a media system that no longer functions to harm us, to perpetuate a myth of Black inferiority as a political project, but a media system that is dripping with the truth of our communities and Black self-love, because we love ourselves, right? We just need that story to be out there and to be told and to have the infrastructure to be felt. So, when you're talking about media infrastructure, you're talking about distribution, you're talking about newsstands. And we thought that creating a custom-built newsstand as an artistic installation, and then same as the film, taking it around the country on tour, would be a great way to invite communities into this beautiful future that we see.
Yes, I actually want to bring Vanikia back up here. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the reception to the newsstand. Y'all have literally been all over. So yes, catch me up. This was just the third stop.
Yes, 3 stops. So last year in June, the week of Juneteenth, we debuted in Harlem, and it was a beautiful time, hosted at the Africa Center and the Schomburg Lit Festival. And we partnered with Black Thought Project to ask the questions of what's a media system that you long to see, in which Black stories are told, asking what do we love about ourselves, things of that nature. Later on that year, in November, I believe, we were in Austin, Texas, in conjunction with Afrotech, where we built a portal into the future, asking the questions, what technologies will get us to those visions of the future that we have. And then we have this last installation that happened last month, or what is time? Earlier this month in Chicago, where we partner with Intelligent Mischief as well as a few others to continue asking these questions about if Black people's stories were actually told and they were held with that care and compassion that Colette mentioned. What would the world look like? And we know that it would be a benefit to us all. So I'll end there and pass it to Diamond if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you so much for laying out how we be out and about. And yes, that was the beginning of October. But I think one thing that's really important too is how place shows up in every newsstand. So when we were in Harlem, it looked different from when we were in Austin, and it looked different from when we were in Chicago, and how the life and the history of the context of each of those places really shows up in the publications that we feature, in the artists that are associated around with the newsstand, and in the stories that we tell, and in the context of time that we talk about. And I think that one thing that's really consistent through all of them is how we merge this history of the past and the future that we're looking towards. So sometimes we get asked, what role does legacy Black media play in the future? And in all of these, we answer that they are a part of it. And we answer that through collaboration and through action. In New York, we partnered with the Amsterdam News, the oldest Black newspaper in the country, to create a story of reparations of the future that use their archives, their over 100-year-old archives, to go back and see how we've been telling these stories for over 100 years. We had stories from the future about love columns, partnered with stories that have already been written about love columns and things of that nature. And then in Austin, we were really focused on tech in the future, but a lot of the portal that we created was also inspired by ancient wisdom and the idea of wind chimes and the way that our Black grandmothers communicated with one another. And then in Chicago, I participated in the curation of the publications. We really bridged this gap between who are the radical storytellers of our past, like Fred Hampton and women of the Black Panther Party, and how are they connected to the storytellers of today, like The Tribe and Baltimore Beat and Reparations Daily-ish and San Quentin News. So always holding this timeline that isn't linear, but is more circular, and including who is in this vision and how we're moving towards the future.
Yes, and I got to give a shout out to, our collaborator on the Harlem activation, the Black Thought Project, led and founded by Alicia Walters. I got to give a shout out to Afrotech, for creating the space that we were able to be in there in Austin. And I got to give a huge shout out to Media Justice and Brandy Collins Dexter for throwing down with us on the Chicago activation. And like Diamond said, we be out. But, we know that it's the time is ripe for dreaming, co-dreaming the futures that we want, particularly in the realm of media and narrative, which is going to create the conditions for all kinds of justice.
I do want to note that within this past activation, we had a panel that focused on the importance and the need for the radical Black press. And in the times that we're in, take that how you will, to say that such a thing is needed. So to do a callback to Joe's point, it's not just the essay is not just a chronicling of media harms, but also Black resistance and radical Black storytelling and what's required of us, like Diamond said, with the Black Panther Party having their newsletter circulated and things like that. Like, what are things that we can be doing in this moment to push back against the status quo and the world's forces that are telling us the lie of Black inferiority and things of that nature. So also shout out to the panelists there, some of whose publications were actually featured within the newsstand. So again, a call back to membership. We can't do this without you. We have a lot of folks who make a lot of hands that make the load light. And yeah, it's amazing work to be doing, timely work as well.
Vanikia, can I attempt to shout out the publications? It was Kansas City Defender, Baltimore Beat, Public Narrative out of Chicago, and The Tribe out of Chicago. Is that right? Yeah. Shouts out to y'all.
Thank you.
Going down.
Yes, and I know we'll have super exciting updates for the next stop. I don't think we want to spoil that just yet, but no, this has been great. And thank you, Colette. It's always so awesome when we get to talk about Black in the newsroom and hear from you. So thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for the future of this team and always going to be available, just let me know, you know what I mean? But always here to support and going to continue to throw down on media reparations, baby, because it's coming.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So with our last 10-ish minutes here, I want to talk about one final incredible partnership that our team has really undertaken. So we talked a little bit about working with colleges, universities, and really focusing on the next generation. And I think the reparative journalism curriculum is just one of the biggest steps in that direction that I've seen really across the industry. So we're going to show a quick video just to kind of introduce you all to this work. And then Diamond and Vanikia are going to come back and just talk a little bit more about their work with USC, Colorado College, and the curriculum in general.
In the United States, the journalism industry has a legacy of harming Black communities and other communities of color. Not all of us have learned this history. Even those of us who practice as journalists know only portions of this story. Let's take a look back at 3 historic examples of media harm. First, the Boston Newsletter. The Boston Newsletter, our nation's first continuously published newspaper, ran its first slave ad less than a month after its founding in 1704. The paper's publisher served as a broker with enslavers, publishing at least 66 slave ads with inquirer of the printer in the notice. These ads resulted in the sale and trafficking of as many as 100 enslaved African and indigenous people. Second, the Rocky Mountain News. In 1864, U.S. cavalry troops slaughtered nearly 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho people in what became known as the Sand Creek Massacre. The Rocky Mountain News framed the massacre as a military victory and applauded soldiers for defeating what the newspaper had portrayed as a dangerous indigenous community. Only later did the truth surface. This was a mass murder of mostly women and children.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Benicia. Thank you so much for sharing that trailer. That video goes over an overview of things that you can find in the Media 2070 essay, things that you can find in Joe Torres's required reading, News for All the People. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the impetus for that video, and then we'll talk about how we've implemented it into college curriculum. And so reparative journalism is a baby of media reparations in that it is looking specifically at the journalism industry and the institutions that feed in and out of it to understand what are the processes, policies, and culture that we need to create to begin to win repair within journalism. And so for over a year, maybe, and some change, I did some research into what that would take. And so I studied global repair responses and global repair movements in response to like large societal harm. So I studied truth commissions in South Africa. I studied the land back movement in Turtle Island, also known as the US. And I also studied reparations as a broader topic. And what I did was try to pair how do these reparative processes map onto journalism. And I want to shout out Liberation Ventures because we use a lot of their repair cycle to understand what are the 4 stages to winning reparations in general and how can that apply to journalism. I also talked with various media makers that are already building and seeding repair in their communities with media and art. And then I also engaged in a lot of community conversations where people are talking about how do we address harm? What are the different ways that we can build systems and processes to better respond to what's happening to us? And so these videos are the culmination of that research, and we wanted to present it in such a way that honored what we learned through that journey, which is that we need to make information more accessible. We need to add beauty and art and joy into the way that we're talking about the future. We wanted to talk about accountability, solidarity, and reciprocity. And so these videos have come together to try and teach that and let people engage in this work regardless of where they're entering from. And then I'll pass it on to Benicia to talk about how we've implemented that and other things into the college curriculum work that we've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Diamond, both for that description, but just the work that you've been doing to bring reparative journalism to life. I always note when we talk about our curriculum work, a portion of our website in which it talks about how will we know that we're winning. And one of the things that we note is that we'll know that we're winning when students are learning about how the media has harmed communities and created racial injustice. And we'll know that we're winning when students also engage with possibilities for change. And as Tiana mentioned, at both USC, University of Southern California, and Colorado College in Colorado Springs, we've been able to do just that. So I've been given the opportunity to play professor and engage with students around our essay, focusing on media reparations generally or specifically, as well as reparations broadly, taking them through the Movement for Black Lives Toolkit, talking about the requirements for reparations, things of that nature. We talk about reparative journalism, but then we also talk about future journalisms and engage in a speculative, imaginative process of saying, if this isn't working, what would work for you? And as Colette said with the students at these screenings, their minds are so beautifully like optimistic about what the future could look like and the role that they play within that. They know that it's an active thing. They have to be active participants in. So just a few months ago, was in California for 2 weeks teaching with Alyssa Richardson, her class focusing on Nipsey Hussle and what the media got wrong about his life and death. And then another class about the history of George Floyd and the aftermath of his death and uprisings and what the media got wrong there. So it was a wonderful process of talking about how the myth of objectivity and like passive headlines, how we're vilified in life and death, things of that sort, and taking students through like, if you're going to be entering into this industry, how can you go about doing this differently? We also, similar to what Diamond mentioned with New York Amsterdam News, engaged in speculative writing, creating future headlines, such as like the 40-hour work week is abolished and the last prison is turned into a community center. So we asked students their visions of the future and asked them to write about how we got there. So that's been a beautiful process. They always leave more filled with hope. They know that there are heavy things that we're talking about, and they're very realistic but optimistic at the same time. So thank you for the work of reparative journalism, calling these things out, but then calling us to the future that we're deserving of.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I love working with students. And we're also going to be working in deeper partnership with USC over the next year to continue to co-create reparative journalism. Media reparations, like Tia said at the beginning, is an invitation to dream up reparations. And we're figuring out the answers with each other. And so my favorite thing about working with USC and the students is that we are tinkering and experimenting together. Okay, so what does this future look like? What does a more healthy and whole reparative journalism look like? And the Charlotta Bass Journalism and Justice Lab does just that in re-examining past stories and thinking about what a future looks like with them more grounded and more centered in care. And so we'll be working with the students to think about the uprisings of 2020 and what the stories in the media were told juxtaposed against with what actual communities felt. And so look forward to that in 2025. We'll be pairing it with art and all kinds of storytellers. And I think I'll go ahead and bring in Tiana to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you both for such a thorough update. I will say the work with USC, Colorado College, it's some of my favorite because I did go to J school myself. But I think I've also said that after every segment, every project is my favorite somehow. So, yes, this has been an incredible hour. We are getting pretty much right there at 6 p.m. And I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you all for your comments, your words of encouragement, and really just being in this space with us. Having folks to dream with, to do this work with, makes it so much more inspiring for us to do. This live stream will live on the Media 2070 YouTube page. So since I know we kind of threw a lot at you guys, if you ever want to revisit this, please do so. I will also be sending out a link to this video to our village. You'll see clips of it on our social media. And if there's any one particular project that maybe stood out to you, please contact one of us and we'd be happy to bring you into the fray with us. And then I also know that some of you wanted to set up follow-up interviews. Again, we can definitely do that as well. It doesn't need to be just partnering with us. You can include us in your news outlet, your magazine. We are happy to do interviews. So with that being said, this concludes our 4th anniversary live stream. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon, your evening, and thank you all for sharing your time and energy with us today. Thank you.